Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of On the Mic with Mike. My name is Mike Larkin, and joining me today is adult star and a very talented one at that, Miss Kayla Luna. How are you, Kayla?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I am good. First and foremost, folks, for those who have not checked out Kayla on all forms of social media and her work, whether it be OnlyFans, whether it be what she's doing with the Gigantus on her Clips for Sale store, which we'll get into, my goodness gracious, you have been putting in the work content-wise, and it's great to see you just continue to flourish.
Thank you.
You were very
I didn't know you knew about the giantess stuff. That caught me by surprise. I'm really happy to hear you say
no.
that.
No, we're going to talk about that in today's forum. I got to say, folks, this one
Okay.
over here is doing her thing on social media, but also at the same time, I think what's great about the adult entertainment industry, especially which we've had the introductions of many vids and OnlyFans, and especially the Clips for Sale store, isn't it
Oh.
great just to see so much variety that's come as well, just to showcase
Hmm.
adult content and entertainment?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I mean, especially with clips for sale, I'd say in particular, and many vids too. There's a lot of niche kinks, as people say. Everyone's got a very particular taste, and it's kind of nice that the content has expanded to include all these different kinks. You know what I mean? So things that are kind of like really out there and stuff that some people never really even thought about before. They they catch wind of it on the internet, and I think some of them discover that like they're kind of more into it than they originally thought, and I think that's kind of, I don't know, I think it's kind of cool just seeing people being like kind of roped into things. Or like, I didn't like that. And then I watched, something and it just clicked and now I'm kind of into it. And I don't know, I think that's really like, I don't know. It's sweet. It's kind of hilarious, but
Oh, absolutely. I look at it from a stance too, as well as I mean, the old saying was "let your freak flag fly," but also at the same
hmm
time, it's interesting because I think as people, like we're all unique in our own different ways. We talk about kinks and preferences and whatnot, but I think if you're really open minded to something, and if you really expand and broaden your horizons, you may
hmm
never know because there were some things like you remember as you're growing up or back in the day to where we are now in the year 2024. Some things may have been considered taboo, but we're kind of more normalizing a lot of things now as we get older and as we really revolutionize and evolutionize as people.
yeah. I also think there's something to do with, I think it's like internet porn has kind of expanded. Some people are looking for new kind of thrills. You know what I mean? You kind of get bored of watching the same kind of content over and over again. And it's like you've only seen, or you can only see somebody, doing a certain position, a guy and a girl doing a certain position, or whatever you're into, so many times before it kind of just gets stale. You know what I mean? And I think people start to chase this like, I don't know, forbidden fruit, so to speak, of like things like you're saying that are like kind of new or were kind of taboo, and they kind of get like an excitement from it. And I think that's kind of expanded that too.
I don't agree. I remember when I was a kid, and I'll take people back with this reference. Like when you're watching True Life on MTV,
Uh-huh.
they actually did a show, True Life on the Dominatrix, and you get to see like the life of a dominatrix. Because when people think
hmm
about it, it's like, okay, chains and balls and gags and handcuffs and stuff. That maybe
hmm
not be my thing. But once you get into it, it's like, man, this is very interesting. It's new, it's freaky, but it's also
hmm
it spices up things in the bedroom. It spices up the love life. So I mean, if
Yeah.
stuff like that can like really go out there, I mean, why the hell not, right?
Yeah, and there's also, I think from my experience, there's also like a psychological aspect to it too. I think, for instance, since you brought up like dominatrixes and like BDSM, you find that a lot of people who are into that being like, on the sub side of being that are sometimes people who have like a lot of responsibilities and a lot of like things that they have to take care of like daily, and they're in control and they're like there's so much pressure on them that they actually crave just releasing themselves and being in like not in control, and it's like in submitting themselves to somebody else who is in control and tells them what to do, and they just have to follow orders to like make this person happy. It's like a role reversal thing for them that from a lot of the people I've talked to who have been in that position, it's very like therapeutic.
I agree. I think from the therapeutic side, to add on to your point, and
hmm
everybody needs a release, number one, but number two, there's
hmm
something about being submissive and taking either the punishment or just the overall sensation, if you will, that is
hmm
the dominatrix side. And for the ones that give it, I think if you're, and I always look at it like this, like life in itself is a story and you're all painting your canvas. In a way, it's
hmm
a form of art and you're just painting your canvas within your content.
yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And I think speaking of content, man, we're going to segue to this because you, my friend, with your artistic nature and your canvas that you were painting, ma'am, we got to
Hmm.
talk about this. We mentioned the Gigantus at the start of the show here. First of
Hmm.
all, the clips for sale stuff. There's a lot of gummy bear action here, and I want to ask you about the gummy bear side of things. First of all, who doesn't love gummy bears? Number one, compared
Yeah.
to mom. But number two, what is it with the gummy bears fascination? I got to say,
Okay.
I've read the videos.
I mean, so honestly, I mean, it's twofold. One, I mean, I like candy. I like gummy bears. I like the Haribos. Those, the Haribo gummy brand is like my favorite, my absolute favorite. But the reason why I've used them in videos is actually it's actually more of practicality than a particular fetish. Um, because I'm working my way up to it. It's what I really like to do is I want to be able to green screen people into my videos, like people who are, the shrunken people or the small people. Um, I want to be able to like green screen that in, but there's this, with especially nowadays with so much crackdown on on like co-performer releases and things like that. It's like even if I was to green screen someone in, I'm going to have to get them to like the 2257 model release, AID, the all stuff that all the content creators are familiar with when it comes to co-performers. I have to go through that, but I also have to go through the trouble of filming somebody on a green screen, which I've done a lot of post-production work in my, before I even started doing sex work. Um, so I'm used to like the editing. I can green screen just fine. It's getting the green screen footage that's usually kind of difficult. And then finding somebody who's good at acting and then in front of a green screen and then getting all the positions and all the things, it just becomes very complicated. And so instead of trying to go through all of that, and instead of using like little HO scale like figurines, I've just started using gummy bears as like stand-in for people. Um, and there's a particular kink out there called it's just called like transformation. People have this like fantasy of being like transformed into something. Sometimes it's like an inanimate object, sometimes it's something edible, and for that it's like the gummy bear. So it's really was just a decision made out of practicality. I'm like, okay, like sometimes I'll mention like, oh, I've turned people into gummy bears and now I'm going to eat these gummy bears, and they can still see and hear everything. And sometimes I'll do like the POV of like a gummy bear or something like that. Um, yeah, that's really out of practicality more so than like my particular fetish, but I do know it's catered to people who have this fantasy of like being transformed into something where they're helpless. Um, and yeah, so that's why the gummy bears. And like I said, there's also like HO scale like little like people like train enthusiasts would use when they build like their little model trains, and they have the little like tiny people that fit that scale. That's a common prop to use in a lot of giantess videos. The only issue with that is that like my some of my audience likes vor, which is like me eating the people, and I'm not going to eat plastic figurines. That's going to hurt. And I know that from experience from doing that as a kid. So the gummy bears are a good, safe way, to do it, and also delicious.
No, I like that. I mean, if you even wanted to, like, it kind of reminds me of if there was ever like a Willy Wonka parody, you can just add gummy bears to it and all the different candies and stuff, and have like a nice
Hmm.
little scene out of that. Like,
I
I
like
mean,
that.
yeah, but there's so much you could do with it. What I like about how it like
Mhm,
transformed to people and stuff. Like, I think with what you have there, again, not just
mhm,
for the fact that gummy bears are delicious, but it also makes sense for the fact of again, it's something unique, it's something different, and when we talk
mhm,
about there's a fetish and everything for everyone. I think
mhm.
with those videos, like they encompass a lot, and I gotta say, I did dig those videos, but also
Yeah.
just like I did, they were cool, man, and I like what you've got going on with the Gigantus store, man. Like
Thank you.
you're welcome. That giantess thing, excuse me. I
Mhm.
what I like about it too as well is like first of all, you're a tall son of a gun. You have the
Yeah.
stature and you have the finesse with it, so it adds to the overall physique and adds to the overall finesse of what you bring with the content.
Yeah, and it's, I tell people about this too. It's like it's really easy content to film sometimes, because like all I have to really do, I mean, I make it sound simpler. I think there's a little more to it than I probably let on, but it's just like, it's like you put the camera on the floor, you know what I mean? Point it up, and then it's just like you stand over it, and it's a good perspective of giving someone the perspective like they're on the floor. And tying it back into what you mentioned earlier with like dominatrix stuff and people like letting go, a lot of people who are into the giantess content where they are pretending to be the small, it's like they like this idea that they're helpless and they're tiny and they're insignificant. It kind of like gives them a thrill that manifests into like a fetish or like a kink. And so being able to find that angle on the floor where it's like, this is what you're seeing of me, and I'm standing over it, definitely accentuates how like tall I am. I'm definitely not the tallest girl around, but like I'm 5'10" without my heels, and so I definitely can tower over some.
I will say this: I'm also 5'10", 5'11", so I'm right there with you on the tall factor there. I
There
get
you go. It's a good height. We're at a good like space. We're not like hitting our foreheads on like low doors, clearings. But we're also in a safe zone of like we can probably ride any kind of roller coaster we want to.
Oh, absolutely. But I think what I also kind of like about it is you look at pop culture, like you look at the
Hmm.
imposing figures like the Godzillas and the frigging King Kongs, for God's sake. If you can have
Uh-huh.
an imposing figure like that, like it works. And I think with what you're doing from that point of view, from the, the giantess type of vibe there,
Hmm.
it works. Like, and also the fact that, and I got to say this as well, when you're from that tall, finesse, that physique, that
Hmm.
stature, if you will, it works because there's a very appealing internal next to internal beauty factor to it that goes into
Hmm.
said content.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, I didn't even really think about that. So that's you gave me some food for thought now.
No, it's true. I gotta say, first and foremost, there's always some. I mean, when we grow up in school, it's like people
Hmm.
will pick on you at anything, and
Oh yeah.
if you're like the tallest kid, it's just like, oh wow, why don't you just friggin' hit the ceiling? Oh wow, why don't you just
Yeah.
stand over buildings?
How's the weather up
How's the
there,
weather up there?
you know?
So there's always something that people will pick at, but I gotta say, there's something about the tall girls, man, and women like yourself that just go out there and
Mhm.
do the damn thing. So I mean, you gotta give a love to the tall girls.
I mean, I'm definitely have a type, and tall girls are one of my types too. Like one of my first girlfriends in high school was much taller than me, and I just was like, oh, I love the fact that I have to like look up to kiss her. Like that was just very like hot to me. And then one of my past relationships, actually, she was taller than me as well. Um, so yeah, I definitely have a thing for the tall girls.
No, I feel you. I'll throw a pop culture reference out there for everybody. It's like Maitland Ward as Rachel McGuire and Matthew Lawrence as Jack Hunter in Boy Meets World because she was so tall and was always looking up at her when they were dating. There's a reference for people if you go back and watch Boy Meets World. That was like later seasons. Like she was so tall and he was so short. Like it
that
was,
that reminds me. I can't remember. Was it a movie with Tom Cruise? Or what was I think there was a movie where there was a problem with that where it was an actor and an actress, and the actress was much taller than the actor. And so they would shoot it in such a way that they look like the same height, but like in truth it was like because I know like Tom Cruise is a little bit on the shorter side. So I don't remember if it was a movie with Tom Cruise, but I do remember there was this thing about like, well, this actress is too tall and we don't want to like depict that dynamic. So we're going to like have a forced perspective, like he's going to stand a little bit in front or like he's standing on like a soapbox off camera or something like that to make them look the same height. And it's like, I don't know, some of that is just like it's kind of sad. Or I'm like, why don't you guys just be the height that you are? You know what I mean? Like just capture that so that I know some guys can be insecure about their height, and I'm like, and things like that don't help. You know what I mean? Or it's like, oh, you're gonna have to stand on a box to be considered equal to this person or something.
it's very much kind of like I think it was Vanilla Sky when he was in that one. I think that might have been the movie from back then.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it might have been that one, but yeah, that's my guess. But that's the thing too, man. I mean, you could see it in so many different films and so many different avenues. And I wanted to ask you about one of the things you mentioned there, Miss Post Production. Not only
Uh-huh.
are you a whiz in front of the camera, but behind the camera, man, I saw the Becky Bottoms and everything that you did with Jake Grand and everything that went into that thing. That those two had a very sensual and very hot scene. So I got to ask you
Yeah.
about behind the camera because again, the post
Hmm.
production, everything that goes into it, like
Hmm.
there's a lot that goes into it, and just like saying, hey, let's have sex. Here's the sex scene. Boom. There's a lot from the lighting and everything from the perspective
Oh
behind
yeah.
that really makes the film.
And that and like honestly that's not my strong suit. Like the set, the actual, like the shoot,
Mhm.
that's not really my strong point. So like I didn't set that all up. You know what I mean? Like those were that's the lights that we had. It was the camera we had and I just kind of worked with it. Occasionally I think I'm okay at like finding angles, but like when it comes to lighting my own scene, like that's a whole other realm that I usually well, like, if someone else is on set that seems to have some experience, I usually yield to their, I'm like, well, let you light the scene, you know what I mean? But I'll help get the shots, and I know how I like the footage to be packaged for when I'm editing. So sometimes if I'm running the camera, I'm going to make sure that it's being done in a certain way that like I'm thinking about myself as an editor and being like, okay, I want to make sure this matches up. One particular thing is like continuity. Like that's I don't know. Like sometimes I tell myself like, well, nobody's going to notice the continuity in porn. And then there's the other part that's like, maybe they will, and maybe that's going to ruin it for them if this scene doesn't match. Because even subtly, if it's like you're watching a scene and there's the couple's doing their thing, and then the camera just kind of cuts over to a different angle, and it's like their position is different. It's like sometimes it can be kind of jarring, and it gives you this idea of like lost time, and that can sometimes pull you out of like the flow of the scene. So I take editing pretty seriously. You can't always get perfection. Sometimes you really just have to work with the footage you have, and that's frustrating as an editor. Um, but I kind of lost my train of thought there. I got lost in the details of the editing. But yeah, I tell some people, I'm like, if you're a really good editor, the problem is that you won't notice your work, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like if you're doing a really good job as an editor, no one's going to really notice how good of a job you're doing, because it's just going to flow so naturally that they're not even going to acknowledge it. But if you're bad at editing, people will definitely notice. It's like, oh, that was a bad cut, or that was an abrupt cut, or this is pacing too fast, and things like that. So it means a lot to me when someone can comment on my editing, because I'm like, thank you for noticing, because most people won't. And it just means a lot to me.
I think it's the subtleties, intricacies, and nuances that go into any said film that makes
Hmm.
it a great film. And I mean, when you're watching, I remember as a kid, like you're watching Skinamax at like 3 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning, and then here's Widow and his wife Nicole Sheridan and all these movies that they're doing. And you talk about continuity. It's like, okay, it's
Hmm.
similar stuff from this scene and this film, then to this other one. Like they did a lot of similar stuff, but it also kind of feeds off of what we saw in the last film that they did. So it kind of goes together from the sense of the scene, and it also makes it very impactful for what they do, because they were a husband and wife tandem. So whatever
Hmm.
tandem of film that they were doing also transitioned and transmogrified into the next one. So continuity is big in anything.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I think, sometimes you think, when it comes to porn, it's like people aren't looking, you know what I mean? It's not, you refer to it as art. I like to refer to it as art too, but I don't think a lot of the public thinks of it as art sometimes. So they're not really giving consideration to like how the scene's lit or how this is happening. It's like, I just want them to look good and I want to believe they're having sex. Um, which I think that was a point I was going to bring back earlier when you're talking about on set. And I'm not sure if other adult performers you've talked to have mentioned this, but there's something really funny about when you're performing on camera, sexual acts. Uh, a lot of the times, like, it doesn't feel as good as like real sex, because you are doing it a certain way that looks good for the camera. And like prime examples is like penetration shots. You're usually, instead of at you're not being like parallel with each other. It's not a straight on shot. You're kind of at like a, maybe I wouldn't quite say like a 45-degree angle, but you're at an angle. So we're opened up towards the camera, as we say, so that the camera can see what's happening, the penetration. And it looks good on camera, but it's really like what it feels like is somebody like, literally putting something in sideways to you. And it's like, it's kind of uncomfortable. Um, the same thing with like, if you're performing head, fellatio or whatever you want to say. It's like, you're not really like taking it all the way down. It's like you're letting them see, what's going on. They want to see the parts, they want to see this, and you're making more noise than you probably would, so that they can kind of get that experience. And the biggest problem we have, and like this actually, even just tonight when I was shooting with my co-performer earlier, the problem you sometimes get is like limbs. Like people, we like to use our limbs for support, or like to touch things or hold things, but you got to be like super careful that you're not using the limbs most closest to the camera, because you'll block the shot. You know what I mean? You'll block what's happening. You'll put your hand down a certain place, and then suddenly you've completely blocked the penetration. Or you'll set your hand down and you're covering their face or something like that. And that's like, you don't want to do that. So I don't think people take that into consideration. The positions people are in porn, and the weird things they're doing, like holding their arms up or something like that. It's like, that's just to get it out of the way. You know what I mean? Like, the guy's not flexing. He's just trying to keep his arm out of the way, because he doesn't know what to do with it. Because if he tries to like set it down or grab the girl or do something with it, he's going to like block the shot. And then that's just, that can ruin the shot sometimes.
Right. I mean, he's not Christian Bale in American Psycho when he's flexing and having sex with the two girls and the hookers at the same time. No.
I mean, sometimes we're like that. Sometimes
Yeah.
adult performers, sometimes we're watching ourselves being like, "Oh, I look good," you know. But that's like you're really like that's the artistic side. That's not so much a narcissistic side. You're kind of looking like, okay, all right. You're checking the scene. You're like, all right, this is looking good. Like we're both looking good in this scene. This is our best angle. We're seeing everything. It's working. Let's try and keep this going as long as we can until we like change positions. Um, but but there probably still is a little bit of narcissism in there.
It reminds me of like when you're in Zack and Miri Make a Porno because you were talking about the scenes and just everything from the positioning and stuff. It's like when everybody else is just kind of like doing it for the moment, and then here comes Zack
Mhm.
and Miri because they do have that true raw passion and pure love for one another, and then it
Uh-huh.
shines through on camera. It's kind of like that, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? You have that real
Mhm.
raw authenticity to it.
Yeah, in fact, I think a lot of times, especially with like collaboration shoots, but even just like with studio shoots, when you're about to do a scene with a performer who you've never met before, it's like it's really good to try and like build that rapport beforehand. Um, and it's kind of a taboo thing, like technically, professionally, and in the industry, you're not really supposed to be having sex off camera, which makes sense. But I think some people, if they're both consenting to it, I think it actually helps because it's like if you kind of have like sex off camera and you're not doing it for the camera, you kind of get an idea. You can like learn each other's bodies quicker and you kind of find out like how they feel, how this works, like what they like, what we both like. Um, and you kind of build this chemistry that I think kind of carries forward onto the screen. I think people can tell um, no matter how good or great of an actor you are, I think sometimes they can pick up on chemistry between two performers, whether it's Hollywood movies or porn. Um, so yeah, building up that like I said, rapport.
No, I like your style. The way I can best describe it is to add onto your reports. It's decorum and rapport mixed with safe and spectacular because you want to do everything safe within the adult entertainment industry and with your scene,
Yeah.
but also do it in spectacular fashion. So I think having that rapport behind the scene is special. It's also professionalism, accommodation, and comfortability is key.
Mhm.
But I definitely see it from the stance of okay, let's feel one another out before the sex scene occurs. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I can respect that and dig that too
Yeah.
just because of the fact, like again, not we can have something hot that's off screen, but also we can transition and transform that to on screen, which everybody can really take in and really absorb and gravitate towards.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I gotta say, what a lot of people could transform and gravitational pull towards, ma'am, is you've been doing a lot of great work. I saw your stuff with my cup of tea on Twitter, doing the damn thing, doing your own little
Mhm.
scene with him, and do
Uh-huh.
like I said, I mentioned with Jake Grand and Becky Bottoms. For those
Yeah.
particular performers, man, I gotta say, another ones who really just absorb and really accentuate that passion. But
Mhm.
god dang, man, even you by your side, just doing your own thing from the frontal vibe, if you will, and just doing your thing. I gotta say, it's good. Like I said, you're putting out the quality content, especially with what we saw with the cup of tea.
Yeah, no, I like to have fun. I do this because I love it. It's good money, when you do it right, but it's also just something I'm passionate about and I have fun doing it. And I've discovered that through my OnlyFans, and sometimes with my videos, it's like, we were talking about editing earlier, and I actually don't get to flex my editing muscles as much as I would like to because sometimes, especially if it's like solo content, it's like one full shot, and I like barely cut it up or edit it because I've discovered that a lot of like the fans like the in between stuff. Like if I screw up or if I mess up, it's like they kind of want to see me work through that on camera, if that makes sense. I think like the best example was I did a product review for it was a butt plug that like electrocutes you. Like when I saw it in the picture, I thought the little like the little design on it, the graphic design on it was like vibration, and I was like, oh, that looks cool. Yeah, I'll just grab that for this like product review. Got it, and I found out it was like, oh no, this actually electrocutes you like inside of you, and I was like terrified to do it, but I was like, it's okay, like I'm gonna do this video, so I set up the camera and pretty much my whole experience with this was just caught right there on film, like right down to like when I turned it on in my hand and like felt how powerful the shock is, and I'm like screaming and I'm like just like I am so scared to do this, but like I've already kind of committed to it, and finally went through with it and did it. It actually felt amazing, which was like a great experience. But it was kind of nice to find out how many fans were really like just liked that part where it was like I wasn't even naked at the time. It was just me wearing like a Pikachu Kigurumi, like a little like onesie pajama, and just being a total dork, And I think most people would probably have cut that out. But no, people like to see the real side, and I think that's something that OnlyFans has actually brought. Uh, maybe not OnlyFans on its own, but that the platforming, and a lot of people who have found work into doing creating their own content online. It's kind of given this very real sense to it, whereas like a lot of porn, yeah, is like staged, and you don't have like sometimes an authenticity to it. But now that everyone's like shooting themselves, it's like you are getting this dose of like people's real personalities and what they do, and especially because the demand for content is so high. For instance, like for myself, it's like I'm putting out a video every week, and I know some girls are putting out more videos than that. And so when you have that output, you kind of have to start getting clever or think of something. And so some people are just like, I'm just going to show me. I'm just going to be me on camera because it's too tiring to be anything else. And I think that's really like caught on. And I think that's kind of been really beautiful about all the content creation boom that's been happening is just people being more authentic.
First of all, as a fellow nerd and dork, nerds and dorks rule the world, folks. So yeah, I'm
Oh, of
all about
course. But we both had to go through that point in the life when they weren't cool, right?
it. Of course, of course.
We had our trials, and then suddenly nerds and dorks and geeks were cool, and we're like, you guys didn't think it was cool when we were suffering in high school, and now it's cool. Like, all right, like I'm
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy, but I'm also a little bitter.
Oh, yeah. If you like anime, it was like, what the fuck? But now, oh, okay, anime's kind of pretty cool. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty cool. Huh.
I was the only kid in my town that liked anime. And like I tried so hard to get my friends in anime, and they refused. They just had. I'm like, no, no, no. I was like, guys, it's like a genre in itself. There's so many different, it's a medium within itself. It's not just a genre. It's like there are so many different types of genres within anime. Like you can't just write it off as one. And none of them believe me. And now one of my friends who's like, he's been my best friend since like forever. He started watching some of them, and he comes back and talks to me. He's like, wow, this movie's like, it's really impactful. It's really good. And I'm just like, I'm happy to hear you say that, but I'm also kind of bitter because I told you about this in high school and you refused to watch it. And now you're coming. I have vindication and it's gratifying, but I'm also kind of like, but you could have made high school me very happy if you had just listened then. And like,
Right.
so, but
It's,
I am
it's
glad, yeah.
No, it's like those who make fun of boy bands and stuff like that. It's like first and foremost, like the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and 98 Degrees have some doggone good songs. Music is an art
Hmm.
form in its own right, but it's like if you like that stuff, and I'll say this for a guy, you get picked on. But I'm like, those guys secretly like those songs, but they just don't want to admit it. That's the
I
whole
think
thing.
so too. Usually the people who are the loudest about their dislike for something are covering something up. And it's not just guys. I mean, guys and girls do this, but
Yeah,
like everyone does it. It's just like, they doth protest too much type of thing. It's like, it's kind of suspicious that you really want everyone to know how much you don't like this when it's like, you could have just kept that to yourself. You know what I mean? Like, nobody really wants to. I mean, I can't say nobody because I do know a lot of YouTubers that make a lot of money off just ranting and
yep.
criticizing everything. I mean, before YouTube, there was critics. That's what critics did. Um, but it's like, it's like, it's so nice to hear someone talk about how much they love something. You know what I mean? Like we all should flock towards that. It can be funny to hear someone just rant about how much they hate something, but when you're like meeting people on the street, someone who's just kind of like negative about everything is like, it's such a bummer. And it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know if some people think it makes them interesting or like controversial or like fascinating, but to me, I'm like, all right, buddy, like if you're not going to contribute to this conversation, like then just like, it's like, I don't know, maybe I watched Bambi too much as a kid, and it's like, if you got nothing nice to say, like don't say anything at all. Like why are you going to like bring everybody down with this like negativity? Like, all right, you don't like it. Like why you got to talk about, oh, I hate this song. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, so walk away. Like everyone else here is digging it and you just have to shit on it. Like, okay.
First of all, Bambi reference. I like your style. I like your style a lot. But no, that's the thing too, and I'll equate this to this because besides having great talents on this, folks, of all facets of life, including this gem over here, and I'm talking about you, Miss Una. But at the same time, man, like I've interviewed a lot of wrestlers on here, and the problem
Mhm.
I've always said about with people that like wrestling, it's fake, right? And I always say this: the people that say that probably used to like professional wrestling, then they got made fun of for it, and then it's like, okay, I'm gonna join the bandwagon and just make fun
Yeah.
of wrestling. It's like, bro, I know you used to like this, and also if you want to say stuff that's fake, you fucking watch reality television, and these are people that watch like the fucking Bachelor and all this shit. It's like you really
This
want to
is all
tell me that?
stage too.
Like, hello, but that's the thing. It's so funny to me just to see that kind of adaptation stuff. Everybody wants to join the bandwagon. Everybody wants to ride the cool train, and just there's no, like you mentioned before, and we'll include authenticity and genuinity. People like that. You know what I'm saying? If you're
Yeah.
gonna put up a front, why the fuck? Why the fuck bother then?
I think it's more interesting when somebody it's like when somebody says they hate something that everyone loves, like that's not that interesting. But when somebody talks about how much they love something that like nobody else really loves, like that's fat. Like that person is interesting to me. I want to talk to that person. I love hearing people like info dump about something they're passionate about. Even if I have no idea what it is, like I can listen, I'm not very mathematical, I'm not very scientific, but like I will listen to somebody just talk about science when they're really passionate about it because it's like I just love feeling that energy. Um and back to what you were saying also, I wanted to make a point of since I know you've interviewed wrestlers, and just what you're saying about people who are like, oh, wrestling's fake. And it's like, well, it's like I feel like when people who say that, I'm like, you're looking at the wrong part of it. It's like
Mhm.
you're not acknowledging the athleticism that goes into this and the choreography and like the stuff is like the stunts that they're pulling are actually like really impressive. Like you're just like, oh, that was like a fake punch or whatever. But it's like, yeah, but like he's still like that's like a 300-pound dude and like he's doing some shit right now. Like, why can't you just appreciate that? Like the performance itself is very exhilarating.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like if you're just talking about it like it's fake because it's not like MMA stuff. I'm just like, I don't know. I think it's cooler that it's fake. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
like, are you the kind of dude that goes into like a movie theater and says like, hey, this is fake, right? It's like, yeah, okay, it's a performance, dude. Like, I'm enjoying it. I'm entertained.
Right.
It doesn't have to be real to be like amazing.
It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's not the Terminator, right? No, you don't say. But no, that's the thing. People want to you want to see the allure of Arnold Schwarzenegger's not really a doggone cyborg, but you want to see the Terminator anyway. You know that
Uh-huh.
you know that Rocky Balboa isn't really dead or he's very sick in Creed, right? It's just an act to show him getting
Exactly.
older. That's the thing that gets me. And like you mentioned about wrestling, like a couple weeks ago,
Hmm.
there was a tag match where one guy got concussed because he took a shot and he landed his head like right on the mat, and they stopped the match. Like
Yeah.
stuff like that happens, and people don't see that. It reminds
Hmm.
me of God rest his soul when Roddy Piper was on Bill Maher, and Bill Maher was playing up to it, and then Roddy Piper legit pulls down his pants, and he goes metal hip. Like, I have a fucking metal hip here. You want to tell me that it's fake? I got a fucking metal hip right now.
Yeah. I mean, and like some of the stuff, because like I dated a girl who was really into wrestling for a while and I would watch it with her. And like, granted, like I had my hand over my mouth most of the time because I was so like stunned by some of the things because she liked to watch some of the, um, I guess it was like more extreme or like the, like not the, not like WWE type of stuff, but like kind of
ECW,
like
Extreme Championship Wrestling?
I,
Yeah.
I guess so. Where they're wrestling, they're doing this thing, and like, and on the mat, there's like forks or like
Yep.
broken glass or like things
Death
like that,
matches.
and I'm
Yep.
like, that's real. You know what I mean? I was like, holy crap, and like one part, but the one with the fork, it's like he put the guy in like a chokehold and like pushed the fork into his head until it like stuck out straight. And I'm just like, you could like, sure, it's fake. Like that guy probably let him do it, but like that guy still had like a fork sticking out of his
Mhm.
head. And I'm like, this is extreme and it's hilarious. It's like, I can see how I can get into it, um, but like, yeah, anyone who just sees that it's like, oh, it's fake. I'm just like, you're looking at the wrong part of it. You just want to be negative about it. Like,
Yeah, and like you mentioned, add on to your point, man, because you
mhm,
also made a great point in your own right, and I'm gonna follow up with that. Like you mentioned MMA and stuff like that. Like the whole argument that used to be that MMA is real, wrestling's fake. I'm like, y'all do realize, like Ken Shamrock, Ronda Rousey, all these people like Shayna Baszler, who's now in WWE, like all of them came from the MMA world, and now they're in wrestling, so they're kind of blended together of the relationship between MMA and
mhm,
wrestling. Like a lot of MMA fighters are getting into wrestling now too, vice
yeah.
versa.
And like, I don't know, there's a certain part of like we all like I think we all sacrifice a certain part of ourselves for what we do. Even if you do an office job, it's like you're sacrificing hours. And and I know depending on how your workstation is, it's like you do kind of get long-term stress injuries to your back or your hands if you're typing in a bad posture. It's like we all kind of sacrifice aspects of our body, I think, to what we do. And like you said, with wrestling, with like Roddy Ryder, I can't say his name.
Roddy Piper.
There you go. With the metal hip, he's like, I got this like doing, professional wrestling, like fake wrestling, you know what I mean? But like, this is a real injury I got from it. But like, with things like MMA, it's kind of like, it's like boxing, and then even I think to a certain degree with like football stars, it's like these people are really destroying their bodies like rapidly. You know what I mean? Like they have to retire and like by the time they're 30 or something like that because of this. And I'm like, to me, that's brutal. You know what I mean? It's like a professional wrestling, you can do that longer because it's like safer in the context of like, it's a performance. They're still, they're still showing this, uh, physical prowess, and they still have to be in shape, and they have to be on top of their game. And there's all this stuff that goes into it that's like actual real skills, but they're not destroying their bodies the same way that some sports actually destroy the athlete's body, and it's, to me, it's kind of weird to glorify that, to be like, oh, I want to watch MMA because this person's really getting the shit kicked out of them. And I'm like, that is just like, I don't know, that I'm like, that's someone's kid. You know what I mean? Like that's someone's son just getting absolutely pummeled right now. And I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me, but I don't know. I watch a lot of cartoons, so I'm not the target audience.
No, I feel you. It's like when parents are like getting them into like MMA classes at like 8. I'm like, what the actual fuck are you doing? Like, it's too young for them to start doing fucking judo throws and kicks and strikes. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, it's cute when it's like, because I remember the days of like karate. Like I remember taking
Yeah.
karate as a kid, and like my niece took karate, but it's like, as a way of being like it's a sport, and there's like self-defense things in there. It's like, okay, that makes sense. But when you're doing like these actual like competitions where it's like you're really just screwing each other up, and they're going to be scarred for life, you know what I mean? Like with, boxers, and you just, how like they get, like, I think that's, they get a little punchy, I think is the term. It's just like they get like their brain
Yeah.
gets rattled.
Quote Rocky Balboa. I mean, I'm not dumb, but I may be a little punchy. Like in Rocky. Yep.
It's like that, and it's like, I don't know, that kind of stuff breaks my heart.
No, it's like
Um,
CTE is real. Like concussion syndrome is real, folks.
mhm.
Like,
and the, and to me, it's just like, is like, does that have to be part of what you're watching? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the scene in Gladiator. It's like, are you not entertained? You know what I mean? Like, is there not enough blood happening right now for you? Like, you need to see somebody like get their life ruined on live TV for you to like be satisfied. I'm like, what does that say as a society?
right. And I mean, and we'll go tie it back into adult entertainment here because I
Mhm.
look at women like yourself who do great job and put a lot of hard work into what they do. And I mean that in the utmost sincerity and respect.
Mhm.
Like, I love the fact that we get to see when we talk about different preferences and different avenues, but I also admire the fact, like, I feel it's not easy to get into it just for the fact of there's also camming and there's body confidence and then there's the modeling aspect because there are some people that maybe not just want to be in front of the camera. So there's a lot that goes into it that really showcases confidence and overall, dare I say, the accoutrements of what it is to do what you ladies do. And I also admire that because a lot of people don't, really feel comfortable doing that stuff. But once you get in front of the camera, once you show the professionalism, decorum that we mentioned, you're out
Mhm.
there just performing your craft. And I think that's very admirable.
Yeah, and I like it. Like since we were talking about like with the content creation and the explosion of how many people have kind of made a career out of this, I think another really beautiful thing about that is like we've seen a lot more different body types enter, into like the popularity. Like, and I think that's amazing because there is a problem that comes with both genders comparing themselves to people who are essentially models, like supermodels, and porn was dominated by that for the longest time. And it's like, yeah, these are gorgeous people, but it's hard to compete against that when you're like, even if you weren't looking to get in the adult industry, but when you're comparing yourself to that, it's like it really kind of like shoots your self-esteem down. And so now that we have so many more like people entering, like making out this content, speaking of when we were talking earlier, it's like, well, you've found a lot of people have rediscovered or seen new kinks and discovered new things about themselves. Seeing average people, so to speak, like creating this content has given a lot of confidence to people that I think is really beautiful because now they're seeing people who are like, oh, I'm like that. Or some people might even think like, well, I look better than that. And that's fair. I think we all do that sometimes to a certain extent. But it's like, you're not shitting on that person. It's just you're comparing in your mind and you're actually feeling a boost in confidence. And I think like that's a good payoff, and and it's hard, don't get me wrong, because it's like for someone like me, it's like, yeah, I compare myself to some other girls, and I'm just like, there are tons of gorgeous girls out there that I'm like looking at all the time and trying like not to pull myself down of like looking at them like, oh, I wish I looked like that. I'm like, this isn't good. Pull yourself away from this, don't start spiraling down there. Um, but I also get like people, who compliment me, and I eat that stuff up. I love it. It makes me feel good, and I think there's a certain degree of where you're trying to deprogram the negativity in your brain to be like, you have to accept these compliments, because you can get thousands of compliments and just kind of like, yep, okay, yeah, and then you get like one negative comment and it just destroys you. You know what I mean? Like it just eats away at you because you're like, that person meant it, the rest of them didn't mean it, and that's not the truth. You know what I mean? It goes back to what we're saying earlier. It's like this person who takes their time out to say something negative about somebody is like dealing with their own shit, and it's like, and you see a lot of that on the internet. It's like, especially when people, the anonymity,
Anonymity.
everyone, they get to be anonymous. They have a faceless account and they can just say whatever shit they want and they're not being held accountable for it. So you definitely have had like, the internet can be a tough place, to do this, because you can also get a lot of criticisms that it's just, sometimes they're really unfair. Sometimes they're mean. Sometimes, most of the time, I don't think they actually come from an authentic place. I think they come from this person's own insecurities and they need to attack somebody, like when they see somebody who looks average and they're doing porn, this person might, someone on the internet might just be like, oh, like you're too fat to do this or something like that. And it's like, I think that person that probably thinks they're too fat to do this stuff. And when they see somebody who's bigger than them or maybe the same size as them, or maybe even someone that can just even be pinpointed with that kind of criticism at all, they want to call it out. It's like they want to shoot someone else down because that's their own insecurities kind of coming forward. It's like they get uncomfortable, jealous, maybe even of seeing someone else perform something that they don't have the confidence to do themselves. So it's hard to deprogram, to drown out the occasional negative compliment or negative comment compared to all the compliments. And I think I just rambled on for a long time about. I
No,
think I might have gone on a
no,
tangent.
no, you're good. We always ramble when it comes to this show. We always have healthy discussions. So your opinion is very poignant and it's very much appreciated on this forum. And I will say this: it's kind of like as I'm doing the sound effects here, it's the keyboard warrior type of vibe of they'll say it behind the screen, but most of these cats won't say it to your face just because they feel safe behind the keyboard. But I've always looked at it like this, man, because we talk about all different types of women. And me, I could say this with the utmost sincerity and respect. I was raised by a great woman and my mother, and I love women, all different shapes and sizes, body types. It's like when I was younger in my teenage years, I remember there was this young lady who was interested in me and we were vibing. We were having a fun conversation. I can say this right now. She was what would be classified as the BBWs, if you will, folks. And for me, like, you could give me like whatever type of girl, I'm happy. As long as we can vibe and have a conversation, have something very fluid, I'm happy. But it's like when you're like either intimate number one or you're number two, you're feeling that person or you're dating them, then you have someone scoff at you. And it's like, dude, I don't know how you could do that. I'm like, well, I like it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I dig it.
I'm digging it. You know what I'm saying? And plus, I'll say this: a lot of the big girls are also, there's body confidence there with the big
I
girls.
think so.
And that's like, I'm big, I don't care, I'm a whole lot of loving. Yes, you are.
Yeah,
That's the
I
beautiful thing.
love that. That's very sexy to me because I felt the same way. Like I've dated few girls who are like you'd be classified as that, and I'm like they have a confidence that I feel like a lot of like fit girls don't have. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I know a lot of fit girls like know they're hot, and like they body it, but I think some of them are driven by this like need to be thinner or they need to be more fit, and they criticize themselves. Like I said, we all kind of do, to the point where it kind of makes them miserable. And sometimes you meet this like girl who's like, I don't give a shit. I eat what I want to eat. And you're just like, that's fun. You know what I mean? Like, that's who I want to hang out with. Someone who's just kind of like, I'm doing my thing. Like, yeah, I'm big, but I'm proud. There's more of me to love and like stuff like that. It's like, I love that stuff. And I wish more people did that because we should all be doing that. We should all be finding our faults that other that maybe society would describe as a fault and just embracing it and just being like, well, that's me and that's part of what you get with me, and you can have fun with me who loves myself, or you can try being with somebody who actually hates themselves, which isn't a lot of fun to be with. I don't know if anyone listening has been in a relationship with somebody who kind of hates themselves, but like that negativity overflows. You know what I mean? It's like that can poison you as well. So I don't know. My advice is just find the people who love themselves because they've got so much love overflowing that it'll flow onto you too.
No, I feel you 100%, and that's a great point. I mean, I remember like Misha Barton, there's a name for everybody back in the day. Misha Barton, like she put out a quote like, the stigmas. And I'm like, first of all, Misha Barton, you're hot, number one. And number two, don't you come out of here and start talking about the goddamn stigmas of what you're going through when you're friggin' looking gorgeous over here doing your thing on the OC. Like, what the fuck? And also, number two, too, it's one of those things too, as well as negativity breeds negativity. If you're
Yeah.
just gonna sit and somber and sulk, that also is a negative connotation, not only just on you, but on your relationship. Because if your partner's just seeing the negativity and how woe is me, and some people just want to watch the world burn, and here's a dark cloud just raining over there. There's the rain stuff there, if
Hmm.
you will. But that's the stuff that happens. I mean, you don't really want to be around that. So if you can surround yourself with positivity and people that can uplift instead of,
Hmm.
dissipate, you're golden, man.
Yeah, I think so too. And I do think, what you were mentioning earlier, like, because I know celebrities go through this, and I know even like
Yes.
with but even like I was saying earlier, when I was like, oh, I'm comparing myself to like other performers who are just like gorgeous supermodels, and and I'm like feeling kind of like about it. But the reality is that like these girls that like I'm looking at are probably also looking at other girls thinking the same thing, being like, I wish I looked like this person. And then I know that there's people who look at me and it's like, I wish I looked like her. You know what I mean? It's like there's definitely like a flow to this, you know what I mean? That I think like we don't really bring up a lot. I don't think a lot of people like to talk about their struggles. And I think sometimes there is this stigma against someone who's like super hot being like, well, it's really hard, being this way. It's like, you're hot. You don't get to
Yeah,
talk about that. And it's like, no, they go through this too. You know what I
I
mean?
know.
Like hot
Yeah.
people suffer from this. And actually they put themselves under a lot of pressure, that frankly, like someone like me, I'm just like, it's like I could go to the gym more and probably get more fit, but like I don't like doing it, and it's like I'm not gonna make myself miserable. The same thing with like eating. It's like I will try to be considerate of what I eat, mostly for like, I'm reaching that age where I'm starting to feel things that I'm like, oh yeah, it's like you eat an entire pizza. It's like I feel that for a week. You know what I mean? It's like my heart starts to like make weird sounds, and I'm like, that's not okay. So it's like I'm trying to keep mindful of it for my own health. But at the same time, it's like if you're starving yourself and you're not eating the things that like bring you pleasure, I'm like, what are you really doing? You know what I mean? And it's like you only get one life. Like you can starve yourself and eat stuff that's flavorless and all this other stuff so you look a certain way, but like looks are always going to fade, you know what I mean? And so it's like I feel like there's a balance, like eat healthy enough to like keep yourself alive. Like your body needs nutrients, and you can really punish it by eating junky food too much, but also like reward yourself sometimes, you know what I mean? It's like if you want a fucking cheesecake, like go get a cheesecake. And I don't know, that's I watch a lot of Golden Girls, so maybe that's why it's the first thing that pops in my mind. But like, it's like you got to reward yourself sometimes. Or what's it in Twin Peaks with Dale Cooper? It's like every day give yourself a present, you know what I mean? Like I think that's a really important thing to go by.
Well, I will say thank you for being a friend on that point, Miss Kayla Luna. Hell yes. But no, that's the thing too. Like I like your style with how you're coming from with that. And I gotta say, first and foremost, when it comes to stuff like that, like you have everything. You need to treat yourself, like you mentioned, you need to give yourself a present, but also at the same time too. And I'll equate this with what you do. I know you do a lot of solo work, but there's a lot of stuff that brings enjoyment out of people. Like there's one of your scenes, like you talk about with the camera down, and there it's the gigantus that you are,
Hmm.
and it's just like bada bing, bada boom. Here's a big ass cum shot. You know what I'm saying? There's something that is very explosive, pun intended, also as
Hmm.
well, that people enjoy. So I mean, you could see that, and there's something for everybody. And I think that's what goes with everything. Treating yourself with presence. There's something for everybody, but also
Hmm.
at the same time, there's always something from the visual perspective and aesthetic that really tones and really gravitates towards people as well, but also really, just makes people feel good. Pun intended,
Yeah.
also non pun intended.
Exactly. No, I think like like you were like since we're talking about like porn, it's like yeah, it's like obviously there's what a lot of people are performing a certain thing on themselves when they're watching porn, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like it's giving you pleasure, it's giving yourself pleasure, and it's like I think that's like I don't know, I love that stuff. Like I talk that to my fans all the time. And it's like I was like, if you're ever like using me for inspiration when you're jerking off or something, I'm like, tell me. I think that's so nice for some reason. I'm like, that's a wonderful thing. It's very flattering, but it's also like it kind of feels me. Like sometimes when I'm making a solo video and I'm thinking about the person watching this right now. And it makes this connection where it's like, sure, hundreds of people can be watching this, but it's nice to make the viewer feel like it's for them or I'm talking to them, like that. I love that kind of I don't know, individuality or that kind of connection, even with somebody who I may never actually meet in person. I like making that kind of difference. And I like knowing that my kind of stuff is inspiring them to pleasure themselves. Cause kind of like what I was saying earlier about like eating the foods you want, it's just like I'm a bit of a hedonist. And I do believe it's like, well, there are certain things that, you know, there's balance to everything, but there's pleasures in this world. And I think by denying yourself this pleasure, it kind of defeats the purpose of living sometimes.
No,
I don't know if that makes sense.
no, I agree, and I think from your standpoint too, and I mean, for those who've not seen the imagery of one Kayla Luna here, we'll put this into the forefront as well. Like, there's a shot with you with the nice smile that you got, rocking the groovy girls attire and the shirt and stuff like that. Stuff
Hmm.
sticks out that people like and really can enjoy and see from the imagery standpoint, if you will. And I mean, you mentioned scenes. I know you did one back in the day with Christian Triple X in the classroom and stuff. And who doesn't like a naughty schoolgirl, for God's sake, cheating, taking the tests? Like, stuff like that works. And also, you equate it to what we see in the pop culture realm when Britney Spears was the Catholic student and Baby One More Time, and then she's in the
Hmm.
gym and that whole performance. There's something sensual and there's something that's very hot and also very appealing to one's mind. So I mean, if the naughty schoolgirl is always the way to go as too as well. So I had to mention the Christian scene because that also goes into fruition
It's
for what a lot of guys like.
well, since you mentioned it, that even happened tonight. Is frankly, like I'm terrible with setting up scenes, like the
Right.
plots of things. Like I can act with porn, you know what I mean? It's like I can make this sound really good. I can do that stuff. I can do the explicit acting, but when it comes to like actual like scene on scene acting, like I can't keep a straight face. Like I get really goofy and like I get like flustered, I guess. And so I try to like kind of like sidestep things. And so like when you mentioned like with Christian, like the naughty schoolgirl thing, I was like I had such a like hard time just kind of like keeping it straight. You know what I mean? I was just like, I just want to get to the fucking. I was just like, this is fun and all that, but to me, it's like I'm not. You know, it's like a little bit of like a plot is kind of cute, but like just keep it like short and sweet. You know, and like I said tonight, like the performer I filmed with tonight is Ava Venom, who's just gorgeous. She's super hot. But like when I showed up to her place and we were going to film together, I was like, "Do you like to do like plots? Like, do you have an idea?" She's like, "No." She's like, "I hate doing that stuff." I was like, "Okay, cool. Let's just get to it. You know, like let's just jump right in." Because sometimes they can feel a little like awkward. um,
No, I
but
feel you. The
yeah.
acting of it, yeah. It reminds me of like when you used to go to like, all right, I'll take people back with these websites here, folks, and we're really broadening the horizons of old school nostalgia here. But it's kind of like when Big Sausage Pizza was around. The film was here comes the pizza guy at the door, sausage bada boom, if you know what I mean. The sausage, pun intended, is in the middle of the pizza, bada bing, bada boom. We got a scene. So it's stuff like that. Some would find cheesy, also pun intended, for
Uh-huh.
pizza, but also kind of campy. But it works. Like back in the
It's
day,
fun.
right. And but at the same time, it kind of reminds me of like, all right, so when I first started, I'll go into this deep vessel here. When I first started watching adult entertainment, if you will, I
Uh-huh.
was like 13. Like one of the first sites I came across was called girlshuntinggirls.com. And the plot of the site and the scenes were they're in a van and they pick up the girl, and then there's like either a one-on-one or a threesome, depending on whoever's in the film. But I'm like, that's kind of cool at the same time, just because it's
Yeah.
like, you're riding around and then they go to the house and a little bow chicka wow wow, and there we go. Like stuff like that works. The
Well,
simplicity.
I think there's a bit of a there is like what's the word I'm looking for? Like relatability to it. You know what I mean? Like when sometimes there's a fantasy like that, like you're like, oh, these guys are like driving around and they see this like hot chick and they say like, hey, you like, baby, you want to get in and like go to my place? And she's like, sure, you know, and like jumps in. It's like, yeah, I'm sure a lot of guys like fantasize about that. Most, you know, most women are terrified of that. Like a guy shows up in a van, says, hey, get in, come to my place. Like 99% of us are gonna be like, fuck no, you know what I mean? But like I think a lot of guys like to think about like, yeah, like I saw this hot chick on the side of the road. I told her to come back to my place and she said yes, and then we had like hot sex. Like I think like when you have like a plot like that, I think there's something to it. It's like, yeah, like I could do that. That could be me, you know, type of thing. Like the relatability like helps guys like put themselves in the scene of like what they're watching and make themselves feel like this is me. Like I'm watching, you know what I mean? Like you're watching someone else, some other guy fuck this girl, but like I think there's something in your mind where you start to think like, oh, that's me fucking her or something, and that kind of helps build that pleasure up. Um,
No,
that
you
being,
hit that spot on.
uh,
You hit that
huh
spot on.
I think one plot I did like when I shot with Becky recently, and this is actually part of the video that I think I know I tweeted it just recently. It's one of the
Yes.
my more recent ones, but yeah, it's with Jake Grand and BD Cooper and Becky Bottoms, and they're and it's like it's me filming, but like I know you don't know I'm there. I'm just the camera girl at the time. But I'm filming this threesome with them, and then one of them says something like, "Oh, I think like Becky needs more dick or something." And then they're like, "What about you?" And I'm like, "Who, me?" And they're like, "Yeah, get over here, girl." And I'm like, "Okay." And then I like hand the camera off to them, and I like join in the scene. And to me, I was like, that's fun. You know what I mean? I was like, that was like a fun scene to shoot because it's very like, we're not going to like front load this with like a weird plot that kind of gets intricate, you know what I mean? Or like it's kind of like awkward. It's like, no, this is like a real thing, you know what I mean? Like this is, I mean, sometimes that does happen. I've definitely been on set sometimes where I can tell like the camera person's like really digging me or something. And I'm like, look, I know it's not professional, but like off camera, if like if you want to hook up, like I'm into it too. You know, like it's sometimes fun to bring like the set people into it. So um yeah, so I think I've kind of almost like flip-flopped on what I was talking about. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, we don't need plot in porn, and the other times I'm like, oh, but a plot in porn I guess does help drive the scene sometimes. So it's really, I think it's really just the context. Like sometimes people put a little too much into it, and it's like, you know, it's like you made a really beautiful scene, but a lot of people I think are going to be skipping this part because it's like they want to get to like you kind of need to you get like a minute before you kind of need to let the viewer know that like there is porn, like explicit content is coming.
Right. And I think that goes with anything, you know what I'm saying? With the art, you want to build it up, but then you have to,
Hmm.
okay, it's time to get into the brass tacks, so to speak, if you will.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it. And I mean, we talk about like different types of scenes, every different type of vibes. And I'll say this
Hmm.
right now, there's different genres of different pornographies. There's BBW, there's so many that we mentioned earlier, MILFs, and I'm gonna say this right now, and I include the great trans talents like yourself here, Miss Kayla Luna.
Hmm.
Like y'all, there's a lot of great trans stars out there like yourself that's a lot into it. So I love the different genres and categories that we have now in porn that really makes the industry fun and different subsets for people to get into.
Yeah, it's I mean there was a couple points I want to make off of that. I think one thing is like since you mentioned we talked about the giantess stuff earlier and I don't know
Yeah,
if you saw but like clips for sale said like giantess content was their most searched category of 2023.
yeah.
You know, it's like you know there's more people getting into it and now they're running a promotion right now where it's like if you're doing a giantess video it's going to get like pushed to the top. And you kind of start to see, you know, for me like within like the size community as we call it, you start to see it in like media. You're like, I think the person who wrote this scene has a bit of like a kink for this. You know what I mean? Like this seems very like particular. But then also since you mentioned like trans, you know, porn, it's like I know this statistic's been thrown around a lot, but like trans porn has been hugely popular lately as simultaneously there's a lot of this controversy about you know trans people in the public and like you know there's a lot of states right now in the red states especially that are like trying to pass bathroom bans and all these other things and so it's driven up this rhetoric that's kind of very anti-trans which is like awful as a trans person to kind of see happening. It's frightening. There's definitely places I do not go like state-wise because I'm like I just don't want to cause a problem. I don't want to be harassed, you know, like I'll stay away from it. But then you see that these same states are actually the ones that are trending and having the highest amounts of searching for trans porn. And it's an interesting thing, you know, when that kind of stuff happens. I think it might tie back into what we're saying about like the taboo, you know, and I think like there's a certain thing of like, oh, well, this is like a forbidden thing, and that makes it more exciting for me to watch. But I also kind of think like sometimes, you know, I I don't know if I'm just telling myself this to make myself feel better, but I'm like, well, I think as a trans performer, I'm actually helping like you know normalize this and you know and like kind of like draw down the stigmas. It's like we get more people who kind of start to see this, and it's like I think some people would argue it's like, oh, well, they're seeing you in this like objectified way, and it's like that's true, but I also think it's getting them like like they're acclimating to the fact that we exist, you know, and we are just like everyone else. We're real people. We have normal lives and things like that. And I think even though they're, you know, jerking off to us, I think it actually is psychologically helping them adapt, you know, and start to desire. And I think some of them start to wish that they had more trans people in their state so that they could like hook up with one, you know?
I think you put that very much very beautifully, and I like the fact that I look at it like this. For me, I'm a person that with the DGAF mentality of don't give a fuck, because at the end of the day, we're all individuals, whether it be trans, what have you. We're all people at the end of the day. Who the fuck cares? But also at the same time too, we're also come from the days of, especially with the red states, keeping it on the hush, if you will. But I think like we talk about more people becoming more open and more people really expanding their horizons, and not everything is so overclouded or
Hmm.
forbidden anymore. I think you have to do that. You have to stay true to yourself, showcase your
You do.
individuality, and fucking just let it ride, man. That's what you have to do, is just let it ride.
I think a big thing, and this is just drawing from my own experience, but like I grew up in a conservative town, you know, and I knew certain things about myself. You know, sometimes I mean, like I didn't even like know explicitly, but sometimes it's like you were aware of it, but you repressed it because you knew it wasn't okay because based on like your surroundings, people being like, you know, I for instance, like I knew I was bisexual at a young age because I knew I was attracted to both boys and girls. But then just hearing like people in my town talk about like, just having this like very anti-gay, like very homophobic rhetoric terrified me. I was like, holy shit, like hearing them talk about that and like laughing about like harming people like that was just like, holy shit, like I can't come out. I can't be who I want to be in this town because it could actually like hurt me. And you tend to like you push it down and you repress it because you're like, I don't want to pull this string. I don't want this to be real because that's scary. And that's kind of an awful way to live. And nowadays I see, the more that the more that there's trans representation in media, but also like, because like I said, I watch a lot of cartoons and I see sometimes some of the cartoons that are being played nowadays, and there's a lot more of like, there is more emphasis on depicting a same-sex relationship or having a character who may be trans or stuff like that. And I just think about like, if I was like, back if I was 14 and there was a show like this on at the time, it would make me feel so much safer and so much more seen and so much more like I can like be this person and be who I want to be because this is okay. This is acceptable. And I think that's the frustrating thing when you hear about this like anti-LGBTQ rhetoric that sometimes, like Florida is trying to pass and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, it's making kids gay. It's like, no, it's not making anyone gay. It's helping the gay kids realize that like they're okay. It's okay to be this way. And it's like what some of these people seem to be arguing is the opposite. It's like, so you want them to be fearful and repressed and not actually come forward about like who they love or like really explore. It's like, no, they're going to have to fit this mold that fits the way you want the world to be. You don't want you don't want these kids to be themselves. You want them to be you, type of thing. And I'm like, that seems way more messed up to me.
I know, agreed, and it's funny. Like you were talking about, you knew what you like with boys and girls growing up. Like I remember, and I brought this up earlier in today's forum. Like when I was a kid, like I'll tell you first and foremost, Britney Spears was my first crush. My loneliness was killing me, god damn it. But I mean, when you look at, and I went to school with a kid. I'm not gonna mention his name, but he was someone who, we kind of grew up around the same time, and he went to a different high school than I did because I remember he went to I think like a Catholic school right at the time.
Oh.
But I can tell, like I remember like dude, like I know it's okay, you know what I'm saying, because I could tell like he was bothered because of the fact that he had not come out because he was homosexual. And I'm like, brother, like just do you, fuck what everybody else says. Because I did, and I'll say this with the utmost bluntness, if you will, as a kid growing up on Long Island, New York, I went to school with a lot of assholes, as I'm sure we all did when it came
Yeah.
to school. But like, dude, like I don't, who cares, at the same time, like there's a kid who graduated with me who I know is openly gay and he's doing his thing now. Like fuck it, like just do you, just be yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
It's
saying?
yeah, like for me, like especially compared to nowadays, like I transitioned later in life than I think a lot of girls, a lot of trans girls, have been able to, or, trans people in general, I have come to the understanding of themselves much earlier, much younger, and have been able to transition to younger age. And I'm like super happy for them, but I'm also a little envious because I was like, it took me a long time to do it because I was so repressed and because I didn't think this was okay. And I thought this was going to be, harmful. And I mean, it's hard to even say what exactly it was, but it was definitely like something like I woke up one morning, I'm like, do I really want to live my life by what other people expect? I think it's such a weird thing to pull, um, inspiration from, but I think it's Danny DeVito's character Frank Reynolds, I think from Always Sunny, and he has a line that says like, "I don't know how many years I got left on this planet. Things are going to get weird." You know what I mean? And I was like, that was something kind of empowering, where it's just like, it's like, yeah, you don't really know how long your life's going to be. Like I thought about like, it's like I thought about myself like being 6 years old or maybe even younger and dying of some like disease. Like I'm in my like deathbed and I'm thinking about like my life. And it's like, and I realized I'm like, I would feel so stupid if I went my entire life never actually being the way I wanted to be. Because there's, like you said, like there's assholes out there who are getting to be the people they want to be. I mean, maybe they're not. Maybe they're repressing themselves and this is how it's come out, is by being an asshole to the people who are living the lives they want to be, and they need to fight these people. But it's at the same time, it's like there are a lot of shitty people who are getting to be shitty people. That's who they want to be, and that's who they are getting to be. So why not like, why not be yourself too? Why not everyone just be themselves, And it's like the more people that do this, the less, repression there is, the less like controversy that's around this. You know what I mean? Like when we all just kind of realize that like we're just going to be ourselves, and some people, it may not be for everyone, but like we were saying earlier, it's like if you don't like it, then like just don't say anything. Just move away from it. Walk away from it. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to be like negative towards people. If this is not if you don't like this person for who they are, that's cool. You don't need to tell them. Just don't be around them then. You know what I mean? Like I don't surround myself with people I don't like. I don't know why anyone else would.
It reminds me of like when we talk about high school, like the bullies, and I'm gonna say this, I'm sure we had these type of bullies in high school who had the weak comebacks, like you're a pussy man, you're a pussy man, or if you ignore them, they just go, you want to go, and then you just look at them like, yeah, I want to go. Yes, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to go. That's just, it's so stupid. It's so immature. It's juvenile. Like I swear to God, I'm not lying, folks. Like I grow, and I love my hometown, but this is exactly what it was. It was you're a pussy man, or if you ignored them because you could see that you're not getting to them, it would be you want to go. Sure, we'll go. It
Let's
was
go.
let's go. Let's fucking fight. Just
That wasn't me. I was in one schoolyard fight
yeah.
and I tried to walk away from it and the kid made like a move at me and just like by reflex I just kind of like punched like an underhand punch like that and I got him right in the solar plexus and he just doubled down like he just fell over and I walked away and I'm sure people were like wow what a badass. In my mind I was like freaking out. I was like I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to fight, but I just flinched, but I managed to turn the flinch into a pretty good punch apparently, and now everyone thinks that like I'm like some kind of like I don't think anyone actually thought I was a badass. I was never very like cool,
No.
like very whatever kind of word you want to come up with. I was definitely a dork. I was a geek, but yeah,
No, I'm right there with you. When I was in sixth grade, I got one day of ISS because I'll be honest with you, I was picked on from elementary school to middle school, a little bit in high school. Towards the senior year, not so much because everybody's just waiting to get the fuck out of high school, to be completely honest.
I don't got time to bully. I just want
I
to
got
get
no
out of
time to
here.
bully. I just want to get the fuck out of here. So the thing is, like, I remember in sixth grade, like, this gentleman and I are now friends. We're older. This is when we were 12, but we're friends. We're friends. We're cool now. We're adults.
Oh,
But this is
good.
when we were in sixth grade. Um, so he stole my friggin' notebook and he's running around, and I'm like, bruh, no, like you better stop. It was funny for like 2 seconds, and then it just got annoying because he's like running around. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna watch. And I'm by the desk, and I did not mean to do this. So when he was running by me, I like grabbed him, and when we both went into the desk made a loud noise, and and everybody was in shock because they weren't expecting me to do it. Because I'm very much big into turn the other cheek because I'm like, I know if I get mad, I don't want to hurt this person. Like I don't
Yeah.
like violence. Like I was like you. As soon as it happened, I'm like I remember started crying, and I was just upset. I'm like I didn't want to do this to this person, but
Yeah.
like he's fucking like it was
You could
annoying.
say, you're like, why did you push me here? Like,
Why are you
why?
pushing me to this point, bro? Like, why? I don't want to do this. But
Oh
it
my
happened.
God.
It happened. And I got one day of ISS for it because the principal at the time knew I
Uh-huh.
never got in trouble. I didn't do anything. So she's like, we're going to give you one day of ISS. And for him, he got like 2 days of like lunch detention or something. So I
Uh-huh.
got the least of the, the brunt of it. I'm the one who did it.
Yeah, but it's like, but I think it's nice that you had
Yeah.
a teacher who acknowledged like you got pushed too
To the
far because
limit.
like a
Yeah.
lot of times that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the person who is the victim in the situation and finally fought back,
No.
everyone's gonna be like, oh, this person's violent. And it's like, well, you didn't really even look into like how much verbal abuse that this person was putting
Yeah.
with before they finally hit a point of like, I need to retaliate, I need to stand up for myself. And then they do, and it's like, I don't know. And I hear that actually a lot from some parents, some friends of mine who are parents who are telling their kids, like, oh no, fight back. You know what I mean? Like if you get in trouble at the school for fighting back, like you're not going to get in trouble with me. You know what I mean? Like I want you to stand up to these people. I want you to like if someone's pushing you around, like you get physical back. And I'm like, I kind of respect that. You know what I mean? I wasn't a very physical confrontational person. I wasn't even a verbally confrontational person. I could hold my own with verbal stuff. Like I definitely was able to like zing people back, and that was like fun for me. But never like physically. But I do think like having that kind of lesson would be really nice to be like, look, you're not helpless. Like you do have power within you, and you might punch this person back or do something. And he might have friends with him who are all going to like jump up on you kind of maybe like you might get ganged up on. That's a possibility, but the fact that you stood up for yourself like actually like says way more. I think that builds character for yourself, but I also think it um kind of tells these kids like, look, like you will get physical, you know what I mean, like you will fight back for yourself. And I think that can be helpful. I don't know, I'm not a parent,
No,
and
no, you're
I'm I'm not
absolutely
a
correct.
I'm not a child psychologist or anything, so I'm hardly an expert in this. I just think
No,
about my own experience and like people I know.
no. Sometimes you got to take them to Mollywop City. That's what you got to do, and throw some zingers in there. But no, I'll be honest. At the time, my dad was not happy because he's like, that they could have sued us or something. I'm like, first of all, that didn't happen, thank God. But also number two, I'm like, okay, this kid is, first of all, I'm going to be honest with you. This kid, and I love him to death. Again, we're buds now. We've been buds for a while, but he had it also coming because right after me, he was doing it to another kid, and the kid just like back elbowed him right in the face. And he's known for being a little scoochamen, if you will. There's the Italian word of pain in the ass. But yeah, so he had it coming, and I think the teachers knew it. But yeah,
Does he
no,
does he listen to your show?
no, but he
Okay,
knows
good.
what I do. He's my boy. I like
I
him.
was about to say, it's like he could be listening and be like, you know what, I did have it coming.
He knew he had it coming. First of all, he's not dumb, but he knew he had it coming. There's some people that just like to inch and inch and inch, and you have it coming, but you just want to do it anyway because you're fun and you have that sick sense of humor. You
Yeah.
sick son of a bitch.
Some people want to be stopped. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Some people are like, please, like hit me back. So I have an excuse to stop doing this. I've dug myself a hole.
Just gonna fucking punch him right in the dick is what you're gonna do. You're just gonna punch him right in the dick.
Oh golly.
Oh my goodness, just ball busting city. But I
I
will
was
say,
just made me think of Bobby Hill, like, that's my purse. I don't know you.
damn it, Bobby. Well, I will say this. I think in today's forum, we had a lot of great laughs and a lot of learning experiences. And, ma'am, I will say this from the Pearl of Wisdom side. I definitely have to have you back on for a round two. I really enjoyed
Yeah,
this conversation.
I would love to.
Now, before we close this out, I always love asking this because someone with your experience in the adult entertainment industry and what you've gotten to do thus far in your career, what advice would you give to a lot of the up and comers who are getting involved in the adult entertainment industry, doing some adult content creators? Advice would you give them?
I think the advice I would give them is kind of what we touched on earlier in the in our discussion, is that like what's really becoming popular these days is people just being themselves. Like be you, play to you. You know what I mean? Don't try to model yourself after who you see succeeding. You know what I mean? Because like that, when you put yourself in that position, you're always going to be playing catch up. Where you're really going to shine is what you're doing for yourself. And I think like, for myself, it's like I like putting out the content I do. It's stuff I genuinely enjoy. Sometimes I might be inspired by what I see someone else do. I'm like, I want to try that. I want to like that looks sexy, that looks fun. I want to try it. Like that kind of stuff is fine. But what I think like you've mentioned before, like what shines is like, well, the giantess stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, like that's kind of a personal kink of mine. And it's like I know what I enjoy. And then so I know what kind of content I want to put out there because I know other people of this community, like that's the stuff they want to see too. Um, and it's like in my one of my advantages is like I'm one of the few trans performers that do giantess content. So that's like by just being myself, it's like, well, I like giantess content and I'm trans. And then so I started making this content. It's like I started to make a very like I'm starting to put content out there that's very niche. And like that's like I think that's one of the biggest things you can do right now is put the content out there that nobody else is doing. And the best way to do that is just being yourself. Like put out the content you want to see, the content you like, because chances are someone else is going to resonate with that. It's like rule 34, like right? When we're talking about like, oh, there's a fetish for everything. Everything's a kink, or like everything has been reduced to, someone's got this kink somewhere, you know what I mean? And it can be something as weird as like, well, like I like someone who juggles eggs or something like that. You're like, that's so random. Who would be into that? Like, you'd probably be surprised at people who have these kind of like fetishes, and they don't get enough of this. They don't get to see enough of it online, and that could be you. And just making it like as a business part of it, like because you have a rare product, you can charge more. And it's like I get paid more to do a custom giantess video than I do to do a custom, vanilla video, we'll call it. Like, I don't really think it is vanilla, but like someone just wants to be like, oh, I want you to like jerk off and like say my name on camera. I'm like, all right, like that's, my rate for that's this. But it's like, oh, you want giantess content. It's like, well, that's good. Like that rate, there's a lot more work that goes into it, but also like, I know you can't really like get this anywhere else. So it's like, I can up the price a little bit. And I think that's the best advantage you can have as a new performer is put out stuff that's unique to you. Like try to strive to be different. Don't strive to be like anyone else. Be yourself. And the second thing, just to tag on to that, is network, like collab. I think that's like a great way. Like we all that way we're all sharing it on the pot. You know what I mean? Find people that you want to perform with, and it's like don't always don't go clout chasing necessarily. Don't always try to just perform with somebody who's better or more popular or prettier than you or something like that. It's like no, it's like perform with everyone. You know what I mean? Like let's just all like work together, and it's like this way you make this network, and that's going to expand your reach, and you're going to help someone else expand their reach, and you make a lot more friends and collaborators that way. And I think that's, I don't know, I think that will serve more people in this industry than some of the other habits that just don't really pay off.
I gotta say, united, not divided on that front.
Exactly.
And I gotta say, man, all we need now is a friggin' unicycle, somebody juggling with the eggs, man, like making it
Yeah.
look like a carnival act.
Like I
Yeah.
said, I mean, like I don't know where that came from. It's like now everyone's gonna think that like, oh, she likes like egg juggling, and I'm like, I really have no idea. I just never seen somebody do that during porn, and I think like you were to do that, like you're gonna stand out to people. You know what I mean? It's like that doing something unique is going to fascinate people, and that's what you need to do to compete in this industry.
Somebody's gonna be like, oh my god, the yolk. They're turned on by the egg yolk,
Now
baby.
that's a little. I do kind of like that. I like gooiness kind of stuff is kind of hot. Like I did kind of have a little bit of a crush on the xenomorphs from Aliens. I was just like, ooh, I was like they're drippy. I like that.
Fair enough. I like your style. Okay.
Is that a good note to end on?
That is, but I gotta say, where can we follow you on all forms of social media, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, the OnlyFans, the what have you? I know we promote your giantess as well. Where can we follow you, Kaela?
Oh, I mean, so there's definitely a couple places. I think like when you ask like, well, on Twitter, I'm like, I think I'm search banned on Twitter. I don't know, but um, one sure way to do it is just TSKAELAMOON. It's like my old screen name, but there's a lot. So that was like when I was going by Kaela Moon. There's a lot of content attached to that screen name. But I think nowadays I'm going by Kaela Luna, and that's KAELALUNA. And I mean, if you Google that, a lot of stuff will come up. If you type in TS Kayla Luna, all one word, on Twitter, I might show up, I might not. I don't know because I don't know if I'm search banned anymore. But yeah, I think if you Google Kayla Moon, you might be able to find more stuff. But oh, I mean, I also have a website. I'm so stupid. You can go to tskaylamoon.com, and that'll like lead. It's just a little like all my links site. So that has a lot of stuff that you can find there. I'm so
Fair
bad at
enough.
self promotion.
You're fine. Links will be in the description below here on the YouTube channel as
Okay,
well.
cool.
Yeah, as well as the clips for sale and everything you get with the Giantess stuff. It's going to be
Hmm.
awesome. So check it out, folks, on all forms of social media for Miss Kayla Luna. And I will say
Uh-huh.
this, if y'all want to check out this interview and many other great interviews on this channel, subscribe to Michael Larkin. Mike Larkin 92 is the screen name. If you want to check me out on Twitter, it's SM Show 1 or MCL92. And the Instagram is Larkin_92 or MLarkinMB. On the Mic with Mike features great interviews with all different many people of all facets of life, including this one right over here, Kayla Luna. Hello, and so many great talents. And I cannot wait for a round 2 with you, Miss Kayla Luna.
Yes. Oh, I will absolutely be back. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much, and you made a great time in your own right. Thank you. Now,
Thank
before
you.
I close this out, you're welcome. As I always say, life is an art form, and we are applying our crafts. Continue to apply your craft in amazing fashion. And as always, beauty, strength, and dominance are 3 key elements that make women the work of art that they are. And Kayla Luna, I include you in those sentiments. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you so much. Have a good night.